The first time the bell rang, the mountains bowed, not metaphorically. The cliffs cracked, rivers reversed for a single heartbeat. Thousands of birds abandoned the sky at once, leaving an impossible silence hanging over the valley. Every person in the kingdom of Alaris heard the sound. Some dropped to their knees. Some screamed. Others simply cried without understanding why. Because every child knew the oldest story ever told. The Millennium Bell must never ring again. It had remained silent for 1,000 years, until today. And no one had touched it. 17-year-old Rowan had never believed ancient legends. Growing up in the isolated village of Ash Hollow had taught him that stories existed to comfort frightened people during long winters. Giants, sky serpents, living forests, the bell that could awaken the world, fairy tales. His grandfather, however, always disagreed. The oldest lies are usually the youngest truths, the old man would whisper while polishing strange bronze fragments nobody else recognized. Rowan used to laugh. Now he wished he had listened. The bell's echo continued rolling across the horizon long after the sound itself had vanished, as though the world refused to let it disappear. Even the wind had stopped. Not weakened, stopped. Every tree stood frozen. Every leaf remained perfectly still. It was as if nature itself was waiting for something that had already begun. Then came the shadows. Not darkness, shadows. Long black silhouettes stretched across the ground despite the afternoon sun standing directly overhead. They crawled like living ink, sliding between houses without belonging to anyone. People tried stepping away from them. The shadows followed. Children hid inside their homes. Dogs whimpered beneath carts. The village bells refused to ring. Only the ancient echo remained. That evening, the village square filled faster than anyone could remember. Farmers, hunters, blacksmiths, travelers passing through. Nobody spoke above a whisper. At the center stood Elder Miriam, the oldest woman in Ash Hollow. Her face looked older than usual, not with age, with fear. She slowly opened a wooden chest wrapped in iron chains. Inside rested a single scroll. Its edges had nearly turned to dust. She looked at everyone before speaking. For 1,000 years this message remained sealed. Silence answered her. It was never meant to be opened unless the bell sounded again. Someone swallowed loudly. The old woman carefully unrolled the fragile parchment. Her hands trembled, not because she was weak, because she already knew what it contained. She read only one sentence. The keeper has fallen. Nothing else. Just those 3 words. The square exploded into frightened voices. What keeper? What does that mean? Who rang the bell? But Elder Miriam could answer none of them, because the rest of the scroll was blank, as if the remaining words had simply disappeared. That night, Rowan couldn't sleep. The bell still echoed inside his dreams, not loudly, softly, almost like a heartbeat. Each pulse seemed closer than the last. He finally climbed onto the roof of his small home to clear his mind. The stars looked wrong. Constellations he'd known since childhood had shifted ever so slightly. One star blinked, then another, until the entire northern sky formed an enormous circle, a perfect ring, the shape of a bell. Before Rowan could understand what he was seeing, a voice whispered beside him, "You heard it too." He spun around. No one, only the rooftops, stretching into darkness. Then the whisper came again. "Do not answer if it calls your name." His blood froze. "Who's there?" Nothing, only silence. Then, very faintly, Rowan. His own name floated through the wind, not spoken, rung, as if every syllable had been forged from bronze instead of sound. Morning brought no relief. The village well had dried overnight, not emptied, dried. Its stones were warm to the touch despite the cold air. The blacksmith's forge ignited without fire. Every compass pointed toward the northern mountains. Even migrating birds turned around mid-flight. Something invisible was pulling the entire world in one direction, toward Mount Valor, the mountain where the Millennium Bell had supposedly rested. Hidden inside the oldest fortress ever built, no one had climbed it in centuries. Those who tried never returned. By noon, royal soldiers arrived, not dozens, hundreds. Their silver armor reflected no sunlight. Their horses looked exhausted despite fresh roads. At their head rode Captain Seraph, commander of the king's northern guard. His face carried the expression of someone who had already seen too much. He dismounted immediately. "Which one of you is Rowan Ashbourne?" The village fell silent. Rowan stepped forward. "I'm Rowan." The captain stared into his eyes for several uncomfortable seconds, then removed a leather pouch hanging from his belt. Inside lay an ancient bronze pendant. It was broken exactly in half. The moment Rowan looked at it, pain exploded behind his eyes. Images flooded his mind. A mountain split by lightning, thousands of armored warriors kneeling before an enormous bell, a child crying beneath golden trees, a giant chained beneath the earth, and an old man, his grandfather, much younger, holding the same pendant. The vision ended as quickly as it had begun. Rowan stumbled backward. The captain caught him before he fell. "I was afraid of that." "What was that?" Instead of answering, Seraph quietly turned the pendant over. Carved into its surface was a symbol Rowan had seen countless times. His grandfather had engraved it onto every piece of bronze in his workshop, a bell surrounded by 12 stars. "What does this mean?" Rowan asked. The captain's voice lowered almost to a whisper. "It means your family wasn't hiding from history." He looked toward Mount Valor. They were guarding it. That revelation shattered everything Rowan believed about his life. His grandfather had died 3 years earlier, peacefully. At least, that's what everyone thought. But suddenly, countless memories felt incomplete. Why had the old man forbidden anyone from entering the locked cellar beneath the workshop? Why had strangers occasionally visited at night? Why had he insisted Rowan memorize songs in a language no one spoke anymore? They hadn't been songs. They'd been instructions. Captain Seraph gathered the villagers before sunset. "The king has declared a realm warning." Fear spread instantly. Nobody had heard those words in generations. "The bell has awakened forces older than every kingdom alive today." He paused. "The fortress guarding Mount Valor has gone completely silent." "How many soldiers were stationed there?" someone asked. 3,000. "And survivors?" Seraph looked away. "None." The crowd gasped. "You mean they're dead?" "No." His answer was somehow worse. "They're simply gone." That evening, Rowan unlocked his grandfather's abandoned workshop for the first time since the funeral. Dust covered every shelf. Broken clocks lined the walls. Bronze tools rested exactly where they'd been left years earlier. Nothing unusual, until he noticed something missing. The largest workbench stood several inches away from the wall. As though someone had moved it recently, his heart pounded. He pushed with both hands. The heavy table scraped across the floor, Behind it, a narrow stone staircase descended into darkness. The cellar, the place he'd been forbidden to enter his entire life. Cold air rose from below. Not ordinary cold, ancient cold, the kind found inside caves untouched by sunlight. Rowan lit an oil lantern. Each step echoed unnaturally loudly. The staircase seemed much deeper than the house itself should allow. Finally, he reached the bottom. The underground chamber was enormous, far larger than the workshop above. Its circular walls were covered with maps unlike any he'd ever seen. Not maps of kingdoms, maps of sounds. Golden lines spiraled across black parchment, connecting mountains, oceans, forests, and stars as though music itself formed the shape of the world. At the center of the chamber stood a single pedestal. Upon it rested another bronze fragment, the missing half of the captain's pendant. The instant Rowan picked it up, the two broken pieces, though miles apart, began glowing with the same deep golden light. And somewhere far beyond the mountains, the Millennium Bell rang again, once, only once. But this time, the sound did not come from the mountain. It came from beneath the earth. The second toll lasted only a few seconds, but every living creature in Alaris felt it. Fishermen, hundreds of miles away, watched the sea rise into smooth walls before settling again. Deep inside forgotten caves, crystals that had remained dark since the birth of kingdoms suddenly glowed with pale blue light. Ancient ruins hidden beneath forests awakened with silent whispers. And beneath, Mount Valor! Something enormous opened its eyes. Captain Seraph was already sprinting toward Rowan's workshop before the echo had faded. He burst through the front door without knocking. "Where is it?" Rowan instinctively hid the bronze fragment behind his back. "What are you talking about?" "The relic." "You knew?" "I knew there was one." Seraph's breathing was uneven. "I prayed your grandfather had destroyed it." "He didn't." "No." The captain closed his eyes. "I suppose he couldn't." The soldiers sealed the entire street within minutes. No one was allowed near the workshop. Even the villagers sensed something far greater than politics was unfolding. Seraph slowly approached Rowan. "Show me." After several seconds of hesitation, Rowan revealed the glowing fragment. The captain's expression immediately changed. Not fear, recognition. So it finally chose. What chose? The heir. "I'm not anyone's heir." "You are now." Before Rowan could ask another question, the chamber beneath the workshop trembled violently. The maps on the wall shimmered. The golden lines began moving, not magically, purposefully. Like rivers changing direction, every path converged toward one location, Mount Valor. Then the maps continued changing. New lines appeared, dozens, hundreds. They spread across the continent like cracks in glass. Every line ended beneath a different mountain. Seraph stared in horror. There were never supposed to be this many. "What are they?" His answer barely escaped his lips. "Prisons." For centuries, everyone believed Mount Valor imprisoned a single legendary beast. That story was only the version told to children. The truth had always been far worse. There wasn't one prison, there were 12. Valor had merely been the first. The bell had never been built to lock away one monster. It synchronized 12 different seals scattered across the world. As long as it remained silent, every prison remained asleep. But now the bell had rung twice, and synchronization had begun. Rowan looked again at the living maps. Each glowing line pulsed like a heartbeat. One pulse, another. every pulse slightly faster than the last. What happens when they all synchronize? Seraph remained silent. Rowan repeated the question. Finally, the captain answered, "They open." The room became impossibly quiet. Even the lantern's flame seemed afraid to move. Rowan's thoughts raced. Who built them? No one knows. And what exactly is imprisoned? Seraph shook his head. The oldest records never call them monsters. Then what? They call them. His voice dropped almost to a whisper. The first voices. Long before humans ruled kingdoms, before dragons disappeared, before the oceans had names, the world itself had sung. Mountains, rivers, storms, stars, everything possessed a living voice. Those voices shaped reality. A joyful song created forests. A sorrowful melody summoned rain, harmony, sustained life. Until one day, the voices began disagreeing. The oldest legends described it as the first argument. Nobody knew why. But creation itself turned against itself. Mountains shattered continents. Oceans swallowed civilizations. The skies burned for generations. Finally, a group known only as the Keepers forged a bell from something that did not belong to Earth. Whenever the bell rang with the proper melody, the voices slept. The world survived. But someone rang it wrong, Rowan whispered. Seraph nodded. Exactly. Another earthquake interrupted them, far stronger this time. Shelves collapsed. Bronze tools scattered across the floor. One of the ancient maps tore loose from the wall. Instead of falling, it floated. The parchment unfolded itself in midair. Golden symbols burned across its surface. Then a sentence slowly appeared. The keeper has fallen. A second line followed. The successor must choose. The writing vanished. The parchment turned to dust. Successor? Seraph looked directly at Rowan. You? No. Your family protected these relics for 1,000 years. I repaired wagon wheels. You were hidden. I don't even know how to fight. You were never meant to. Outside, the sky darkened, not with clouds, with wings. Thousands upon thousands of black birds circled the village, yet none of them made a sound. They simply watched, waiting. Every single bird stared toward Rowan's house. One soldier rushed inside. Captain, what happened? The birds. What about them? They aren't birds. Everyone stepped outside. The creatures slowly descended as they came closer. The illusion disappeared. They had feathers, beaks, wings, but their eyes were human, ancient, intelligent. They landed throughout the village without attacking. One walked toward Rowan, not hopping, walking like a person. It carried something wrapped in faded cloth. The creature gently placed the bundle at Rowan's feet. Then every black bird simultaneously took flight. Within seconds, the sky was empty. Inside the cloth rested a book. Its leather cover had almost fossilized with age. No title, no lock, only the same 12-star bell symbol. When Rowan touched it, the pages turned by themselves. Stopping halfway through, most pages were blank, until droplets of golden light slowly formed words. The book wasn't being read. It was writing itself. The first sentence appeared. If you are reading this, then I have already failed. Rowan recognized the handwriting instantly, his grandfather's. The chamber became silent again. He continued reading. Do not trust the bell. It tells the truth, but never the whole truth. The next sentence appeared more slowly. The prisons were not built to keep the voices inside. Rowan frowned. Then the final words emerged. They were built to keep humanity outside. Nobody breathed. Seraph whispered, Impossible. But Rowan could already feel it. Somehow those words were true. His grandfather had spent decades hiding fragments of history, because history itself had been rewritten. The voices weren't imprisoned because they threatened humanity. Humanity had become dangerous to them. That realization shattered everything. If the oldest story was a lie, then what else had been hidden? Who were the keepers, really? Who decided what history remembered? And most importantly, why now? Why had the bell chosen this exact moment to ring after 1,000 years? The answer came before anyone asked. The workshop door exploded inward, not from fire, not from magic, from impact. A massive armored figure stepped through the shattered entrance, nearly 8 feet tall. Its armor was carved from black stone instead of steel. No face showed beneath the helmet, only darkness. It carried no sword, only an enormous hammer engraved with circles resembling bells. Every soldier instinctively raised their weapons. The giant ignored them. It looked only at Rowan, then spoke. Its voice sounded like mountains grinding together. The last keeper lives. Nobody moved. The bell has recognized him. Seraph drew his blade. Who are you? The figure answered immediately. The one who should have died 1,000 years ago. Without warning, it struck the ground with its hammer. The shock wave hurled soldiers across the room. Walls cracked. The ceiling collapsed. Rowan barely avoided falling stones. The bronze fragment in his hand suddenly blazed like the sun. The light spread across the floor, forming an enormous circle around him. The giant stopped. For the first time, it hesitated. You still carry the seal. The glowing circle expanded. Ancient symbols emerged from the stone beneath Rowan's feet. He didn't understand them, yet somehow he knew exactly what they meant. Not through language, through memory. Memories that were not his own. He saw impossible cities suspended between clouds. Children laughing beside creatures made of living light. The bell hanging in the center of the world instead of on a mountain, and 12 keepers standing beneath it. One of them looked exactly like him. The vision vanished. Rowan gasped for air. The giant had taken one step backward. It almost sounded respectful. You remember? I remember nothing. You will. Then something impossible happened. The giant removed its helmet. Several soldiers gasped. Others lowered their weapons entirely, because beneath the helmet there was no monster, no scarred warrior, no ancient spirit, only the face of a man, a tired man, with silver hair, kind eyes, and tears running silently down his cheeks. I have searched for you for centuries, he whispered. I prayed I would never find you. Rowan stared at him, unable to look away. Who are you? The man's answer chilled everyone in the room. I rang the bell. Silence. Then he continued. And I did it because the thing beneath Mount Valor has finally begun to sing. For several long seconds, no one moved. The confession echoed louder than the bell itself. I rang the bell. Captain Seraph tightened his grip around his sword. You expect us to believe that after 1,000 years? The silver-haired man nodded. You shouldn't. Before anyone could react, he raised his empty hands. I have no desire to fight. The black stone armor surrounding his body began to crack. Large fragments fell onto the floor one by one. Each piece hit the ground with the weight of solid rock, until only an ordinary man remained. He looked old enough to be Rowan's grandfather, and tired enough to have carried the world on his shoulders. My name, he said quietly, was once Aster. Was? Rowan asked. The man called Astor died 1,000 years ago. The underground chamber trembled again. This time the vibrations weren't violent. They were rhythmic, like breathing. Everyone slowly realized the terrifying truth. The earth beneath them was alive. Every heartbeat came from the north, from beneath Mount Vialor. Boom, boom, boom. The pauses between each pulse grew shorter. Astor looked toward the ceiling. There isn't much time. Captain Seraph stepped between him and Rowan. If you truly rang the bell, then kill me after you hear everything. His answer came without hesitation. I've waited centuries for that sentence. The sincerity in his voice unsettled everyone. Liars usually defended themselves. Astor sounded relieved. Rowan finally spoke. My grandfather knew you. A faint smile appeared. He saved me. He never mentioned your name, because I begged him not to. Why? Because if the keepers discovered I was still alive, his smile disappeared, they would have rung the bell much sooner. Every eye turned toward him. The keepers? Seraph whispered. I thought they protected the world. They did. For a while. Astor walked toward one of the glowing maps. His fingers traced the golden lines connecting the 12 mountains. You've all been told the same story. 12 monsters, 12 prisons, 12 heroic guardians. He shook his head. The truth is infinitely more tragic. Thousands of years ago, humanity had been young, curious, fragile. The first voices welcomed them. The voice of mountains taught them endurance. The voice of rivers taught them adaptation. The voice of fire gave them invention. The voice of winds inspired exploration. Every civilization learned directly from living forces older than time itself. Together, they transformed the world into an age remembered only in impossible myths. There was no hunger, no kingdoms, no wars. Because every voice balanced another, power answered wisdom, strength answered compassion, creation answered restraint. Harmony existed, until humanity learned one dangerous lesson. The voices could share power. Some people wanted more, not knowledge, control. They discovered fragments of celestial bronze, a metal capable of amplifying sound itself. From that discovery came ambition. If the voices answered songs, perhaps they could be commanded. The first experiments failed. The second destroyed entire valleys. The third changed history forever. They forged the bell, Rowan whispered. Astor slowly nodded, but not to protect the world. His eyes filled with grief. To silence it. The bell had never been evil nor good. It simply obeyed whoever understood its melody. A small council of scholars became its guardians. They called themselves keepers. At first they truly believed they were preserving peace. Whenever two voices argued, the bell calmed them. Humanity prospered, cities grew, empires emerged. Then the keepers realized something terrifying. Without the voices, people listened only to them. Power tasted sweet, and slowly, the keepers stopped calming the voices. They imprisoned them, one after another. The world became quieter, easier to rule. Humanity forgot what had been lost. History was rewritten. The keepers became heroes. The voices became monsters. No, Seraph whispered, his sword slowly lowered. My entire order was built to defend that lie. Astor looked at him with compassion. You weren't deceived because you were foolish. You were deceived because every generation believed the last. Rowan felt his heart pounding faster. If that's true, why ring the bell now? Astor closed his eyes. Because silence has a cost. He pointed toward the glowing maps. every imprisoned voice continued singing. Softly, so softly that no human could hear them. But for 1,000 years, they have sung alone. Their harmony disappeared. Their loneliness became grief. Their grief became rage. The earth shook again, far stronger. The maps burst into brilliant light. One glowing line suddenly turned black. Then another, then another. The synchronization had begun. Aster looked directly at Rowan. The bell didn't awaken them. It warned us. Outside, the sky split with blinding white lightning. Not one strike, hundreds. Each bolt connected to one of the 12 mountains across the entire continent. Every prison was waking simultaneously. Captain Seraph rushed outside. His soldiers stared in stunned silence. Far beyond the horizon, Mount Valor was opening. The mountain itself wasn't collapsing, it was unfolding like gigantic stone petals surrounding something buried beneath. Clouds spiraled downward instead of upward. The stars became visible despite daylight. The air vibrated with a note so deep it could be felt inside bones. Not heard, felt. People across the valley dropped to their knees. Some covered their ears. Others began crying uncontrollably. Children smiled without knowing why. Old men laughed. Animals gathered together peacefully. The sound awakened different memories inside every living soul, memories from a time before words. Rowan looked toward the mountain. I have to go. Seraph nodded immediately. So do we. Aster shook his head. No. Everyone turned toward him. The bell chose only one. The bronze fragment suddenly flew from Rowan's hand. Captain Seraph's matching piece tore free from his pouch. The two halves met in mid-air. The broken pendant became whole. Golden light flooded the chamber, then the pendant dissolved. Its liquid bronze wrapped itself around Rowan's wrist, forming a narrow bracelet engraved with 12 tiny bells. One of them began glowing. Only one. Aster smiled sadly. The first seal has opened. Without warning, Rowan heard music. Not around him, inside him, a melody older than language. Every note carried impossible emotion, joy, wonder, hope, loss, love, regret. It wasn't merely being heard. It was remembering him. Images flooded his mind. He saw the original keepers, not as rulers, as frightened young scholars trying to save a dying world. He saw their first noble intentions. He saw their gradual corruption. He saw centuries of lies built upon tiny compromises. He understood something most people never do. Evil rarely begins with hatred. It begins with fear. The music suddenly stopped. A single voice replaced it. Gentle, ancient, beautiful. Will you repeat their choice? Rowan looked around desperately. No one else had heard it. The voice continued, or will you make your own? Mount Valor fully opened. At its center stood no monster, no dragon, no giant, only an enormous figure made entirely of light. Its outline constantly shifted between human, mountain, river, and sky. Its face changed every second, young, old, male, female, child, elder, everything, nothing. Its eyes contained galaxies. When it finally spoke, the entire world listened, not because of power, because every living heart already knew the melody. I remember you, the voice said. Its words echoed across oceans, across deserts, across forgotten ruins. It wasn't speaking only to Rowan. It was speaking to humanity. I remember when you feared the dark. I remember teaching you how to make fire. I remember your first song. Its voice broke with quiet sorrow. I also remember the day you chose silence. The light surrounding the voice dimmed, not from weakness, from heartbreak. For 1,000 years, I waited. Tears streamed down Rowan's face. Not because he was afraid, because somehow he remembered waiting too, not with his mind, with his soul. The voice stretched out one hand. No threat, only invitation. Come. Captain Seraph looked at Rowan. You don't know what will happen. No, you might never return. I know, Aster whispered. Whatever choice you make, let it be yours. Rowan began walking. Each step toward Mount Valor caused another bell on his bracelet to glow. 1, then 2, then 3. The entire valley watched in complete silence. Not a single soldier tried to stop him. Not one villager called his name. For the first time in 1,000 years, history itself seemed to pause, waiting for one ordinary boy to decide the future of an entire world. Rowan stood before the first voice and finally understood what every generation before him had forgotten. The greatest prison had never been built from stone. It had been built from fear. Fear of losing power, fear of change, fear of trusting something greater than ourselves. The bell had never been a weapon nor a curse. It was a reminder that every choice echoes far beyond the moment it is made. The keepers had chosen control over harmony, believing silence would guarantee peace. Instead, they created 1,000 years of loneliness for the world and for themselves. Rowan chose differently. He chose to listen before he judged, to understand before he commanded, to trust instead of control. And because of that single choice, the voices sang together once more, not as rulers of humanity, but as companions walking beside it. The mountains breathed again. The rivers found their true course. The forests whispered with life. The world did not become perfect, but it became alive again, because true strength is never found in controlling every voice around you. It is found in having the courage to hear them. Sometimes the oldest legends are not warnings about the past. They are invitations to become better than those who came before us. And perhaps every time we choose empathy over fear, another ancient bell rings somewhere beyond the horizon. If this story captured your imagination, there's much more to come. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a new tale. Until next time, take care and keep wondering.